The room was packed. 80 angry homeowners stared at Todd as sweat beaded on his forehead. He clutched the podium, his knuckles white, trying to maintain control. That's when I stood up, holding a thick manila folder, and said the words I'd been rehearsing for 2 years. Todd, can you explain why $15,000 was paid to a landscaping company that doesn't exist? The silence that followed was beautiful. If you've ever dealt with someone drunk on power, someone who made your life miserable just because they could, then you know exactly how satisfying it feels when they finally get what's coming to them. This is the story of how I took down a neighborhood tyrant who thought he was untouchable. If you love stories about justice served cold, hit that like button, subscribe for more revenge stories, and buckle up because this one is epic. When my wife and I closed on our house in Maplewood Estates, I remember standing in the driveway, breathing in that fresh suburban air, thinking we'd finally made it. Nice neighborhood, good schools, quiet streets, the American dream, right? Wrong. I met Todd the day we moved in. He showed up unannounced, clipboard in hand, wearing this self-satisfied smirk that should have been my first red flag. He introduced himself as the HOA president and handed me a packet thicker than my mortgage documents. Just some light reading, he said with a chuckle. Rules of the neighborhood. Make sure you follow them to the letter. The way he emphasized those last 2 words made my stomach turn. Over the next few months, I learned what kind of man Todd really was. He was the worst type of bully, the kind who hides behind rules and regulations while operating like a petty dictator. He'd fine families $200 if their trash cans were visible 1 minute past 9 a.m. 1 minute. He'd measure grass height with a ruler and issue violations if your lawn was a 1/4 inch too tall. But here's what really burned. Todd's own property was a disaster zone. His fence violated city height ordinances. He had unpermitted structures in his backyard. His grass? Patchy and overgrown. But somehow miraculously, Todd never got fined. Rules for thee, but not for me. My wake-up call came 3 months after moving in. I just finished staining my back fence, using the exact shade listed in the HOA's approved color palette. Except there was one tiny problem. That specific stain was discontinued. So I bought the closest match from the same manufacturer. We're talking maybe a half shade difference. You couldn't tell unless you held a color swatch directly against the wood. Todd could tell. 2 days later, I found a violation notice zip-tied to my mailbox. $500 for an unapproved fence color. My chest tightened as I read it. $500 because a company discontinued a product? I grabbed my receipts. The documentation showing the stain was unavailable and marched over to Todd's house. He answered the door in a bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, looking completely unbothered by my obvious distress. I explained the situation calmly, professionally. I showed him the receipts, the manufacturer's website confirming the discontinuation, everything. Todd took a long sip of his coffee, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Rules are rules, buddy." Then he closed the door in my face. I stood there on his welcome mat, hands shaking, feeling something I hadn't felt since I was a kid, getting bullied on the playground. Complete, burning powerlessness. But underneath that powerlessness, something else was building. Something cold and patient. If Todd wanted to play by the rules, I'd show him what that really meant. Todd's first critical mistake was underestimating me. He saw a pushover, someone he could steamroll and forget about. He had no idea who he was dealing with. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up with a smile and a plate of cookies. "Hey everyone," I said brightly. "I'm new to the neighborhood and I'd love to get more involved. Are there any open positions on the board?" Todd practically laughed. "Well, we could always use an eager volunteer. How about recording secretary?" "Perfect. I'd be taking notes at every meeting, documenting every word, every decision, every vote." For 2 years, I played my role flawlessly. The helpful newbie, the guy who always showed up early to set up chairs, the one who never questioned anything, just smiled and nodded and took detailed, meticulous notes. I watched Todd operate like a student studying for the most important exam of their life. He was predictable. He'd schedule important votes for meetings he knew certain board members couldn't attend. He'd lose paperwork submitted by homeowners who challenged him. He'd bully and intimidate anyone who questioned his authority, wearing them down until they just gave up. But I wasn't going to give up. I was gathering ammunition. During those 2 years, I noticed something else. Something that made my pulse quicken every time I thought about it. The money wasn't adding up. Our HOA fees were steep. $350 per month. When I mentioned this to a friend who lived in a similar neighborhood, his jaw dropped. "We pay half that," he said. "What are you guys getting for $350 a month?" Good question. What were we getting? The community pool was closed more than it was open, always due to maintenance issues. The landscaping looked neglected. Streetlights stayed broken for months. Our common areas were falling apart while Todd constantly bragged about his excellent financial management. Something was very, very wrong. I started asking questions, casually at first. "Hey Todd, when you get a chance, could you share this year's budget? I'd love to see where our fees are going." He'd laugh it off. "Don't worry about it. I've got everything under control." When I filed an official request for the financial records, which, by the way, HOA rules required him to provide, he ignored it. Weeks passed. Nothing. I filed a second request. Still nothing. So I started talking to neighbors, knocking on doors, asking if anyone else had concerns about the finances. And oh boy, did I hit a nerve. One neighbor, Patricia, told me she'd been requesting budget information for 3 years with no response. Another, Mark, claimed he'd seen Todd's contractor buddy installing a new patio at Todd's house using HOA purchase materials. Someone else swore they'd spotted Todd's kids swimming in the community pool during one of its maintenance closures. Every conversation added another piece to the puzzle, and the picture that was forming made my blood boil. I filed a formal complaint with the full board, citing Todd's repeated refusal to provide legally required financial documentation. I CC'd every board member. I cited specific bylaws. I made it impossible for him to ignore ignore. 3 weeks later, Todd finally, begrudgingly, handed over a box of financial documents. He basically threw it at me during a board meeting. Happy now, he sneered. Oh, I would be. Very soon. That box of documents was my treasure chest. I spent every evening for weeks going through every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement. My wife thought I'd lost my mind, spreading papers across our dining room table like some conspiracy theorist. But I wasn't crazy. I was focused, and I was finding gold. Invoices were missing. Payments were mislabeled. And some expenses? Completely bizarre. $15,000 to Green Valley Landscaping for community ground maintenance. I searched for the company. It didn't exist. Not registered with the state. No business license. No website. Nothing. I cross-referenced every expense with our HOA's bank statements and started making phone calls. Todd had listed payments to a dozen different contractors over the years. I called every single one. Half of them had never worked in our neighborhood. The other half confirmed they'd been paid, but their invoices showed amounts thousands of dollars less than what Todd had recorded. He was inflating the numbers and pocketing the difference. But the smoking gun? I found direct transfers from the HOA account to what I eventually discovered was Todd's personal LLC. Over $50,000, disguised as administrative fees and emergency repairs. Todd wasn't just a bully. He was a thief, a con artist who'd been robbing his own neighbors for years. I compiled everything. Spreadsheets, bank records, photos of Todd's unpermitted structures, notarized statements from neighbors. I built a case that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. And then I waited for the perfect moment. HOA annual meetings were typically attended by maybe 10 people, max usually just the board members and 1 or 2 homeowners who got dragged along by their spouses. Todd loved it that way. Low turnout meant easy control. But this year was going to be different. I spent 3 weeks before the meeting knocking on doors. I didn't tell people everything, just enough to get them angry and curious. Hey, did you know Todd's been refusing to show anyone the budget for years? Don't you think it's weird that our fees keep going up while everything's falling apart? I planted seeds and watched them grow. The night of the meeting, I arrived early. My heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. This was it. 2 years of planning, investigating, documenting. Everything came down to the next hour. Homeowners started filing in. 10 people, 20, 30. By the time Todd arrived, looking irritated by the crowd, there were over 80 people packed into that community center. Standing room only. The air was thick with tension and body heat. Todd's eye twitched when he saw the turnout, but he recovered quickly, putting on his fake smile. He started the meeting like always, droning on about fiscal responsibility and how difficult it was to manage the HOA. How much he'd sacrificed for the community. I let him talk. Let him dig his own grave with every self-congratulatory word. Then I stood up. Todd, I said, my voice calm and clear, I have a question about the budget. He forced a laugh. I don't think this is the time or place. Actually, Todd, it's the perfect time. This is the annual meeting. We're supposed to discuss finances. I pulled out my folder, thick with documentation. Can you explain why $15,000 was paid to Green Valley Landscaping, a company that doesn't exist? The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Todd's face went red. You're reading the documents wrong, am I? I walked to the front, handing out copies of my report to everyone in the room, because I've also got records showing you inflated contractor payments and pocketed the difference. Oh, and these direct transfers to your personal LLC? $53,000 over 4 years. People started reading, whispering. Then the whispers turned to angry muttering. Todd, try to regain control. This is absurd. This is a witch hunt. I've given years of my life to this community. You've given years to robbing this community, I said. And I've got bank statements, invoices, and witness testimonies to prove it. The room erupted. 80 voices demanding answers, shouting over each other, directed at Todd, who stood there looking like a cornered animal. His face was purple now, sweat pouring down his temples. I call for a vote, I said loudly, cutting through the chaos. All in favor of removing Todd as HOA president, effective immediately. A forest of hands shot up. I didn't even need to count. Todd, you're done. After Todd was removed, we hired an independent auditor, a real one. They spent 2 months combing through everything and confirmed what I discovered. Todd had embezzled over $50,000, mismanaged tens of thousands more, and committed multiple counts of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. We filed a police report. We filed a civil lawsuit. Todd tried to fight it, hiring a lawyer and making ridiculous counterclaims about defamation. But the evidence was overwhelming. His shady contractor buddy, also exposed, banned from doing business in the county. Their little scheme unraveled thread by thread. The courts ordered Todd to pay full restitution plus damages. To cover it, he had to sell his house. The same house he'd lorded over everyone from. The same house he'd used as his throne in his petty kingdom. I saw him on moving day. He couldn't even look at me. Just loaded boxes into a U-Haul while neighbors watched from their windows. His wife looked devastated. His kids looked confused. And honestly, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remember that smirk. Rules are rules, buddy. And the feeling passed. Todd's house sold to a wonderful family with 2 little kids. Every time I walk past and see those kids playing in the yard, I smile. The HOA completely restructured itself. We implemented term limits, required multiple board members to approve any financial decision over $500, created an online portal where every homeowner could access budgets, meeting minutes, and records in real time. Transparency, accountability, the things Todd feared most. Our HOA fees dropped. The pool got repaired and has been open all summer. The landscaping looks beautiful. The neighborhood feels like an actual community now, not a dictatorship. And Todd, I heard through the grapevine that he tried to join another HOA board in the next town over. Someone Googled his name during the interview. They laughed him out of the room. Justice wasn't just served. It was plated, garnished, and savored slowly. Here's what I learned. Bullies rely on people being too tired, too scared, or too busy to fight back. They count on you giving up. But patience, documentation, and playing the long game, that's how you win. Not with anger, not with screaming, but with cold, calculated, undeniable proof. If this story gave you chills, absolutely demolish that like button. And tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare? What's the most satisfying comeuppance you've ever witnessed? I want to hear your stories. And if you want more tales of justice served cold, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from. Thanks for watching. Remember, the best revenge is always legal, always documented, and always worth the wait.